So, Shaun, you brought up something to me a couple weeks ago, and this is going to take us into topic number two. We're always trying to think of topics to do, and you and I don't like to just do, let's preview the tight ends, let's preview the quarterbacks. Like, we try to get deeper and look bigger picture and different things like that. And you said something to me, and I hadn't really thought about this, like as far as like doing a show, and something that we've talked about, together, but it wasn't something that was like ever like really dive into it the way that we did. And the question you asked me is, why do you think? What are you said like this? What are the three reasons that make you think, if you do, that this team is going to be different? So, what do you mean? And so, this is basically what the premise of the show is. We've seen Notre Dame be really good in the past. 0-2, you have the great start to the season. And, it didn't go great at the end, but man, what a fun year that was for us as Notre Dame fans, just to kind of watch that season, and Notre Dame is back, and Ty Willingham's going to have them back and all that kind of stuff. And then the next year they go out 5-7. And then, we see Bob Davie come in and he actually, you could go back to the Bob Davie era if you really want to get into it, but like, Bob Davie replaces Lou, and are things going to be as good as they were before? And you're like, I don't know. And then he has that one great, 2000 season with some of the big wins. And you're like, okay, is he going to turn it around or not? And season doesn't end well. And, next year he loses, and then they're in trouble. And he gets fired. And then you get the Charlie Weiss era. And you think to that 05 season and just the magical season that was. You go 9-2 in the regular season, and you're literally a yard and a couple seconds away from beating USC, which was the juggernaut of the time. It'd be like, beating Georgia in the regular season in 2022. And that's the equivalent of what that would have been, that how big the defending national champs, currently ranked number one, just like rolling everybody. And you almost get that, just an absolutely magical season in 2005. The next year, they actually had a better record, but they were a worse team. And they were never the same under Charlie Weiss. And then you get to the Brian Kelly era, and you go to 2012, and you have this wonderful, magical season. They go 12-0, and despite there being some injuries, that was not a perfect season for Notre Dame in regard to they caught every break possible. They earned that 12-0. Then you go play for the national championship the next year, 9-4 season, and just some really just sloppy losses. You think of the loss to Michigan, where you're just like, man, that just was they just kind of outplayed you, outcoached the entire time, and it just was kind of a sloppy game. You then get smacked at home by Oklahoma. You lose on the road to Pitt. You get beat by Stanford again, and that was not a great Stanford team. And it just kind of disappoints you. 2015, okay, they're back. Notre Dame is back. Season didn't end well, but man, what a great year. Next year, you go 4-8. 2 years later, you're back 12-0, make it to college football playoffs. Big win over Michigan, big win over Stanford, big win at Virginia Tech. Just a great year. Yeah, you fell short. You got beat by the national champs in the semifinals, but what a great year. Then the next year, you go 11-2. It was one of the most unsatisfying and disappointing 11-2 seasons that I've ever watched, because you just weren't a very good football team. You beat up on a lot of bad teams. You played two ranked Power 5 ranked opponents, and one of them you kind of choked away a chance to win. The other one dominated you. Your only ranked win that year was over Navy. The rest of your schedule was pretty down. Maybe the next best win you had was Virginia. I think went like 9-5 that year. It's probably the second best team you beat. That Bryce Perkins led, Bronco Mendenhall led team. That was disappointing. You bounced back in 2020. Go to the college football playoff in the wild COVID year, which I will take to my grave as the best coaching job Brian Kelly ever did, when you consider just all the craziness that season. The next year, Notre Dame goes 11-1. But again, Shaun, it was the most unsatisfying 11-1 season ever. You beat 0 ranked football teams. You played one ranked team, one team that finished ranked at the end of the year. And that was Cincinnati, and they embarrassed you on your home field. You barely beat Toledo. You had comeback win after comeback win. You had to come back and beat Virginia Tech. You had to come back and beat Wisconsin in the fourth quarter. You had to come back and beat Toledo in the fourth quarter. And honestly, your overall schedule was just really just not good. And now we're here again. 2024 college football playoff, make a run to the national championship game, beat Georgia, beat Penn State, beat Texas A&M on the road. Great season, magical season. And we're here in 2025 saying, okay, is this going to be different? Or is this just going to be kind of a, and what does it mean? They're going to be good, but do they take a step, or can they at least maintain? And that's kind of the question that you look at, Shaun, and that's posed here is, will this team be different? So first, we'll answer that question. And then two, why? So I'll let you begin, Shaun, so I've set the stage for what we're discussing. I'm going to let you begin talking about why you think this team do you think this team is better? And then we'll probably give our top 3 reasons. So I'll have you give one, and then we'll kind of go that way. The 3 reasons of why we think what we think. So to begin, Shaun, do you think this team will be different? And then tell us the biggest reason why you think this team will be different.
Yeah, so I battled because I didn't just list 3. I put them in order of importance to me of why. And this one snuck up because I had depth. I was going to go with depth, number 1, just the depth, the roster, injuries impacting, because I think injuries flat out, 2015 was probably the last time I felt like this is a real contender for a national championship, and injuries right off the bat just snuffed it out, right? And so I think this team, like you mentioned, there are certain guys that if they get injured, probably be really jarring to the team and to the chances of winning a national championship. But the roster has been built in such a way, and what you just seen them, how you seen them run to the national championship with an injury-riddled season, you feel like that's already set in place for this program and these players to be able to overcome that. But the off-season approach by the head coach, that is number 1 for me. When I heard how Marcus Freeman was still seething, that this man coming off 2 seasons where there were questionable losses, people were like, talking about putting him on the hot seat. And this man has the most wins in any Notre Dame season and a run to the national championship with probably one of the best head coaching jobs you've ever seen at Notre Dame. He has that in the back pocket going into the national championship. He's an underdog going into the national championship. And he's not sitting on his laurels saying, well, man, that was a darn good season. We got through that. With everything, we should be proud. We should be happy. No, this dude was upset. There is no one that can tell him or convince him that he should not and his team should have not won that game on January 20th. You're not convincing him otherwise. And his approach to looking at every facet of his program and his team shows me that he's locked in to not let anything fall off. He won't allow it to happen. He's taking the accountability and responsibility. Before he even gets to the players, he's taking accountability over the offseason to say, this is going to continue to ascend. And I love his approach to everything he's done in the offseason. He said he wasn't as visible as he was in previous off seasons because he was locked in and he delegated some things. And even in doing that, the way he handled losing Chad Bolden and replacing Chad Bolden, the way he handled losing Dylan McCullough, replacing Dylan McCullough, he was I think even in those decisions, Bryan, we've seen him have to replace guys on his staff, but the searches were quite more public, in my opinion, in previous years. He was very quiet with the way he went about things. And I think we knew the guys that he was going after, specifically for the general manager position. But when that main guy...
That's because those sides were talking a lot more.
Absolutely.
Not so much that Notre Dame was putting that stuff out there. That's those guys were saying, hey, talking to media people saying, hey, that didn't happen with the D coordinator.
And I think that speaks, I think your head coach has a quiet confidence about himself now. To whereas now he knew he wanted to be an elite coach. He had the audacity in recruiting and in other areas to sit down at that main table with Nick Saban, Dabo Swinney to announce, I'm here, Notre Dame's here. But now by going through the ups and downs. Let me tell you something, Bryan. I taught this yesterday. Everybody has a story, man. Everybody has a story. You know the difference between the superhero and the villain, Bryan? Their character. That's it. Their character. Either your character makes you the superhero going through what you went through, or it makes you the villain or the criminal going through what you went through. And he has gone through some stuff, and his character has taken him to the place where he's one of the best head coaches. Man, there's not a lot of people that go through those difficulties and those losses. Even the way he had, man, the way he stuck by Riley Leonard early. It's a lot of head coaches.
Everybody was calling for him to be gone.
Man, it would have been easy.
Yes.
To move on to Steve Angeli. Easy.
Season's over. We lost Northern Illinois. We're not a championship team. We're not going to the playoff. Let's move on to our younger guys.
Let's move on. And no, we are a good football team. This is our guy. We can win with him. We can get to the national championship and win a national championship with this guy. I don't care what you guys are talking about. He's our quarterback. And that just speaks to, man, that really speaks to who he has become.
That's my top reason is coaching in general. And obviously Marcus Freeman's at the top of that. I mean, your point, I love your analogy because I think of when you look at like Homelander, for example, he's kind of like from The Boys, he's kind of like this combination of like Superman and Captain America, you know, like, but more so like Superman. But he's a sociopath, right? So he's a villain. And like that's a great analogy. I've never even thought of it like that. That's phenomenal. But it is so true because your character defines what you do. When everybody can be a cool person when things are going great. You know, it's like I deal with this with people who have their faith challenged all the time. And I have relatives like this where it's like, man, God is good when life is good. But when life's not good, you're like, what's the problem, God? You know, it's like, okay, now it's getting hard. And all of a sudden you want to blame God for everything that's going on. Like, okay. And like now your faith is all of a sudden shook. Like what Paul says in Philippians 4:13 is I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. It's not about I can pick up this car if I have enough faith. It's no, I'm going to be content whether I'm rich or poor, imprisoned or free. Like I'm going to find contentment in that moment. It's so my character doesn't change because of the circumstance that I'm going through. And that is such a great analogy that you use, Shaun, because it's cool to be that cool head coach that is fun with the media and cool in the locker room and all this kind of other stuff. When you are winning, but can you be that guy when times are tough? Or do you start blaming other people? Do you start kind of saying, hey, it's this guy, it's that, it's we're this, you make silly comments, you know, and all these other things like we've seen from previous coaches when times get tough. Yeah, that is when your character is truly exposed. And we saw that last year when Notre Dame was down. Marcus Freeman could have flinched. I kind of expected him to flinch on, to be honest with you, because that was a far more devastating loss than Stanford or Marshall, simply because of the expectation of this team compared to that team in 2022. And if you would have thrown Riley Leonard under the bus, you're flinching. You're literally doing the opposite of what you're telling your players to do. And we've seen past coaches use guys as scapegoats. Saw Jack Cohn kind of get used as a little bit of that by the previous head coach. So it is interesting to see, Shaun, but it doesn't stop there. It's not just Marcus Freeman. Why do I have more faith that this team is going to be different? It's the presence of Mike Denbrock. It's the presence of Mike Mickens. It's the presence of Al Washington. It's the presence of Mike Brown. It's the presence of Joe Rudolph. There's continuity. There's guys that have shown a certain floor. Does Joe Rudolph need to do better this year than he did last year? Yeah. But he showed me something last year compared to what he did the year before. There's now a new baseline. The baseline was here after year one. The baseline is now here after year two. You know, like there's still some question marks. You know, how's Chris Ash going to be? Marty Biaggi does some things that kind of frustrate me, but he does a lot of things that I really like. And he's been a better special teams coordinator, in my opinion. Actually, the funny thing is, the one thing that I most assumed Notre Dame was going to be really good at under Marty Biaggi because of his track record, they haven't been very good at, which is field goal percentage. Now, I don't really put that on him because, like I said, if Mitch Jeter's not injured last year, the field goal percentage looks way different. But it is just kind of ironic that the coverage teams have been outstanding. You know, they've gotten they've gotten some blocks, they do some good things, and so there's a level of preparation and coaching and development. I watch what the D line did last year after losing Boubacar and Jordan Patojo and Jason Onye, and just you go through the year. Gabriel Rubio misses a third of the year with an injury. Riley Mills goes down, and they just still went out there and kept battling, kept plugging away, kept doing what they needed to do. And then lo and behold, they're able to beat Penn State and Georgia without Riley Leonard, without Boubacar, without Jason Onye, without Jordan Patojo, with Howard Cross, a shell of himself. Because it's like, look, next man up, and you're going to get prepared to play at a high level. And are there things Joe Rudolph has got to do a better job with? Of course. Are there some things he did that I would have wished he would have done differently last year? Sure. But the fact of the matter is, he did lose Charles Jagasol. He did lose Ashton Craig. He did lose Billy Schrouth. He did all these things. And he found a way to get the guys ready to go play at a level higher than what we saw from, like 2021 offensive line, for example. And I think that's where I have a level of confidence where I didn't. In 2013, I had confidence in Brian Kelly because I don't know that I had completely jumped off the bandwagon yet. That didn't really happen until the 2015 offseason and really the 2015 season, because I agree with you, Shaun. I still think that was one of the most wasted championship opportunities of my lifetime since 1993, really. When you look at a team that had all that, and the fact that he didn't make the transition from year one to year two at coordinator was like, okay, I don't know this is going to be good. And then when he doesn't make it again after 2015, you have Jalen Smith and all these NFL players, and you still can't hold teams to less than 20 points a game with that talent. And then I was kind of like, okay, he just ain't that guy. And then some of the stuff I heard and all that, like, I don't know that I had expectations of 2016, which is why I said at the time, I said on Bill King's show, like, look, this team's either going to figure out their problems and work stuff out and be pretty good again because there is talent, or they're going to implode. Like, I did not have a lot of faith in that team. You look at 2021, I had faith in that team because of the talent, but it wasn't developed properly because you had a coach who wanted out the whole season. We now know why that team didn't live up to expectations. That right there is the biggest thing for me, Shaun. In 2019, same kind of deal. I just didn't have a lot of faith that Brian Kelly was going to be able to get the most out of that team. It was had the potential to be really good, but I don't know that I had a lot of faith that he was going to do it. And that's different now.
And I think
it's him on down. It's Freeman on down.
Mm-hmm. I think it's important because you hit an important point, and in the chat was spot on, because it does take talent to win. But what you're watching with Notre Dame, as evidenced by last season and everything that you just laid out perfectly, Bryan, that team was a direct reflection of their head coach. That team took on the character of that head coach, what he had gone through the previous, not flinching after the first two seasons on his program and what he believed in, not flinching on the quarterback he believed in. This team, even after losing to Northern Illinois and all of those injuries, they believed in who they were. And they believed that who they were was still good enough to win football games and win a championship. And no one can convince them otherwise. That is a team. That's why head coaches are important, because they infuse character into the young men. The assistant coaches infuse character into now. Why I'm confident, I believe this is a program that has character, not just talent. They have character that's going to carry them through from top to bottom. They're going to be every team has a story. Like I said, every team can tell you about that moment where they could have come apart at the seams. Every year, Every team has a moment where it was one thing said by the coach or one thing said by a player that kept things together. Every championship team. Go ask Ohio State. They have a story. I bet you after that Michigan game, there's a lot of things that could have happened to that season and to that team. But the character moving forward allowed them to win. And you have to tip your cap to the guy that he was taking a beating after the Michigan game, on top of taking a beating the previous 2 seasons for their losses to Michigan and losses in the playoffs. But he found a way as the head coach to keep the program going and keep it ascending. And that takes character. As much as he could be born on second base, third base, wherever he was born, it takes character to lead young men and to lead a group of men, in period, in a program to that ultimate success. And so the character of Marcus Freeman, and like you said, the character, when you have good character, you usually are good at seeing others with good character. And now, man, you watch Jawan Sider and how he's recruited and how he's being received by the current running backs. You look at Mike Martin on the recruiting trail and how you talked about important conversations he's had with a couple of recruits that led to them ultimately committing. This program and the direction in its totality, on the field, off the field, and just even how he is kind of, I don't want to say bridged the gap, if there was a gap between football program and school and faculty. If there was a perceived gap, that gap is...
There was absolutely a gap because previously there were coaches, and this isn't unique to Brian Kelly. Bob Davie was this way. Ty Willingham was this way to a degree, where what was going on campus was used as an excuse for why they couldn't win. Now, under Bob Davie, I think there was probably a legitimate reason to feel that way. Under Ty, there was a legitimate reason to feel that way because I don't know that those guys got the same support that Brian Kelly got. I don't think that Charlie Weiss necessarily got the support from the school that Brian Kelly got. And that's the difference, but that's the fact, is it was always somebody else's fault. And the thing I like about this current staff is there's a level of accountability where, and I've shared this story before, but I think back to Marcus Freeman's first game calling defense for Notre Dame. He gives the wrong signal for the call. Call goes in wrong. Florida State goes off for a long touchdown. So what does he do? Is immediately gets sidelined? That's on me. That's on me. I screwed up. I got the wrong call in. That's on me. Like, players went back to the bench thinking they're about to get chewed out. And you say, okay, there's like, oh wow, okay, coach is doing what he's asking us to do. That coach asked us to be accountable, and he's being accountable. That wasn't true from before. And like, you need that. But 2011, 2013, 2019 in 2015, Shaun, are reasons why I never put talent first anymore in these conversations. Because I've seen teams with talent that didn't even come close to competing for a championship. Don't even make me list the 2011 roster again. You're literally going to have 2 future Hall of Famers on that roster, and they went 8-5. And that's not even including Tyler Eifert and Michael Floyd and Darius Fleming and Manti and all those. I mean, Manti Te'o will eventually be a college football Hall of Famer. You had 2 future NFL Hall of Famers and a future college football Hall of Famer on that team, and you went 8-5. And they were veterans. They weren't freshmen. They were veterans. 2 of them were done after that year. And so that is still reason number 2. Because you could also have the best coaching in the world, and if you don't have the players, you're not getting it done. And it's not just talent, it's the depth of talent. I think it's fair to say that there have been teams under Brian Kelly whose top 5 might be more talented than the top 5 on this team. It's at least debatable. Because when I look back to that 2015 team that has Jalen Smith, Will Fuller, Ronnie Stanley, Quentin Nelson, Mike McGlinchey. Like, I didn't even mention CJ Prosise. I didn't even mention Kavari Russell. I didn't mention Isaac Rochelle. I didn't mention Jerron Jones. I didn't mention, a lot of good players on that team. I'll stack that 5 up against a lot of people. 2012, Manti, Zach Martin, Tyler Eifert, Stephon Tuitt, Lewis Nix. That's a pretty darn good top 5. What the difference is now 6 through 30, you're better. 6 through 40, you're better. And this is the point that I've made about that Alabama game in 2012. I'll take Notre Dame's top 5 and stack that up against Bama's top 5. Again, we're talking about some of the best ever do it. Tyler Eifert, Zach Martin, Manti, Stephon Tuitt, Lewis Nix. But Bama had their 6 through 10 was as good as their top 5. Their 11 through 15 dominated the Notre Dame's 11 through 15. That was the difference, that in size. That's what the difference was. Now you look at it and you say, I'll take Notre Dame's starting lineup athletically top to bottom and stick it up against anybody's, not just their top 5. Whereas now it's not, man, I think Drake Bowen could be a stud at Notre Dame, but I hope he's not hurt by the fact he's playing next to insert linebacker that's a nice player but shouldn't be a starter at Notre Dame. Now it's like, who's he going to start? Which stud is he going to start next to? Is it going to be Kingston? Is it going to be Jalen Sneed? Is it going to be Jaden Alsbury? It's like which guy is it going to be? You're not asking for the tryhard guys to become prominent players anymore. The tryhard guys are now great depth players. They're great special teams players. Now the version of tryhard for this team is like Bodie Cahoon, who's 6'2", 240, runs a 4.5. That's the tryhard guy now. That's the version, this team's version of the tryhard guy. It's Teddy Rizak who runs a 4.5. I mean, that's where it's a little bit different, Shaun. It's the talent, it's the depth of talent, where you can lose a Charles Jagasaw and put in an Anthony Knapp, not have to try to figure it out with a Michael Carmody or a Tosh Baker who just weren't ready and weren't left tackles. You can lose a Benjamin Morrison and replace him with a Leonard Moore, who's an elite talent. That's the difference between then and now. Is injuries at times back then were more devastating. Now, 2015 team, I thought, did a decent job of overcoming those injuries. I don't think that team went 10-2 in the regular season because they had injured players. I don't think that's the case. I think that the coaching didn't always know how to get the most out of some of those players. So I think that's the thing is it's the coaching, which includes development, but also the depth of talent for this team is as good as it's been since Lou Holtz was the head coach. And I'm talking like prime Lou Holtz was the head coach. That's also why I have a different feeling about this team than I have teams in the past.
Yeah, talent's second for me as well. And I think it's all tying together. What we're saying, and even the chat has been fantastic today because, it does take talent to win championships. But the talent has been elevated by the head coach that came in and went after guys that previously Notre Dame wasn't going after. That's the only way you're going to get better talent is by going after them, recruiting them, and getting them to commit to your school. He's done that. And absolutely, Brian Kelly resuscitated the program, if that's the word you want to use, took them to great heights, but he couldn't get over that last obstacle, which was what? Winning big games against top talented teams. Notre Dame has been able to acquire talent, which they weren't doing at a certain level, and then they were able to take that talent and win big games, which they weren't able to do. So that's it. You're right. He was left with a really good program, but he took it to the next level. That's what you're supposed to do. Everyone should take what is given to you and improve upon it. And Marcus Freeman has done that. And he's done that by acquiring great players that has given us the confidence because the depth is exactly what he said after losing to Oklahoma State in the bowl game, moving into that spring. I don't want ones and twos. Remember this? I don't want ones and twos. I want 1A and 1B in this program. And people laughed at him because of the state of the roster at that point. And here we sit 3 years later, and we're saying we have more confidence because we look at the roster and we see 1As and 1Bs. We were laughing looking at talented players that might end up third string in the secondary. When we, for a decade, secondary was looked at in a negative light at Notre Dame. And now we're at a point where Mike Nichols and Marcus Freeman has turned it into. I just watched the Wisconsin game you spoke of earlier at Soldier Field with Jack Cohn.
Mm-hmm.
Cam Hart had 2 interceptions in that game. He had just flipped over from offense.
Yeah.
He had just flipped over from offense and was the star of the secondary. But he had to be that. They didn't have a choice because of the talent or the lack thereof. And now we're talking about top 100 players on the roster possibly being the third string safety or being the third string defensive back. It's crazy the 180 that's happened. So absolutely, like I agree with what everybody's saying, but it still goes back to what has changed and what has allowed Notre Dame to get to this point to have elite coaching and an elite roster from a talent standpoint.
Yeah. I think one of the biggest things I get tired of hearing the most is that Freeman inherited a much better program than Brian Kelly inherited. And I think that is true in this regard. Brian Kelly arrived at Notre Dame in a situation where the facilities and the overall state of the program off the field was not up to par. It wasn't. The notion that Marcus Freeman inherited a better roster than Brian Kelly could not be further from the truth. And there's still people making that claim. Like, I kind of feel like that's part of the propaganda machine that Brian Kelly brought with him to Notre Dame. That he was so good at employing. His political background gave him a great understanding of the need to manipulate the media and manipulate the supporters of your program so that you could say things like that. Like, do I really need to remind people of the players that Brian Kelly inherited and the holes that were also on the team that Marcus Freeman inherited? Both coaches had things they had to overcome. Both coaches had strong foundations. The person who's primarily responsible for fixing the things that were broken at Notre Dame when Brian Kelly took over was Jack Swarbrick, not Brian Kelly. Jack Swarbrick's the one that rose the money to get the new field. He's the one that rose the money for the new indoor facility. He's the one that rose the money and spearheaded the Campus Roads project. So I think that it's not as simple as saying, oh, you were given this great situation and you got to make it better, because I think what we're seeing now, and part of where my confidence is from, is it's an embracing of what makes Notre Dame unique compared to the previous 10 plus years where you fought against what made Notre Dame unique. And when you're fighting against the things that make you unique, that make you who you are, you're always going to put a cap on yourself because you're unwilling to say, hey, look, what other people find to be a weakness, we're going to turn into a strength. Lou Holtz did that in a big way. His thing was always, hey, we're going to be the most physically, mentally tough team in the country because nobody else has to go through what we have to go through. This whole thing of having to go to class, having to live in dorms without air conditioning, et cetera, all the things people complain about, that's why we're tougher. That's why we're going to win. And that's the difference. And that's where a word that you and I use a lot, Shaun. This is kind of my third reason why is it's a different culture now than it was before. And it kind of ties in with number one, because culture to me is established at the top. There's no more excuses. There's more accountability now, partly because of coaching, but also partly because of the roster. There was a time where Brian Kelly and his defense had to make some really tough decisions about how he wanted to punish certain players, because what came after that was way different. And he didn't do a good enough job recruiting and developing to have options after that. Now it's like, okay, you don't want to do what you need to do? Cool. Next man up. And this guy actually might be more talented than you are. And that's, I think, the difference. But also, last year, believe that the Northern Illinois game, Shaun, and I want to get your thoughts on this. I feel that the Northern Illinois game last year was needed for Marcus Freeman in this program. There needed to be that final. I'm trying to think of the right way to say this. There needed to be that final character test, because that team showed us all a lot when they went down to College Station and walked into that environment that we were told all summer it's going to be too hot. It's going to be too loud. It's the toughest place to play in college football. Now, apparently, it's not even in the top 20, according to, college football 2026. And all this talent, Mike Elko, blah, 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 almost beat you last year, Duke. They handled that business and did what they need to do to get that win. And that team was feeling really good about itself. And I think there was a little bit of final thought of it. I think Marcus Freeman said it perfectly. The next week he said, we had to learn how to win, or we had to learn how to handle success. And I think throughout Marcus Freeman's tenure, they had proven that they could handle adversity well. You start off 0-2, you bounce back, and you beat Cal, then you smack North Carolina, beat BYU. Like, that team responded well. I think that team responded very well from the Stanford loss. That could have sent that team down in the tank, and they didn't. They bounced back. We saw them have that really tough stretch between Ohio State and Louisville, where they lost Ohio State, lost to Louisville, almost lost to Duke. And then how do they bounce back? Dominate USC, blow out Pitt, have a devastating loss to Clemson. And how they respond to that? 3 straight blowout wins. Like, we've seen this team respond well to adversity. What this team needed to learn last year was, we're going to show that we can handle this kind of we've got to show that we can handle success. And that wasn't beating Miami and Louisville. It was beating Georgia Tech and Navy and Florida State and Army and Virginia and USC and Indiana, to where there was no more of those drop-down moments that we had seen where, okay, it looks like they turned the corner, and then here comes Stanford. Okay, it looks like they turned the corner, and here comes Clemson. It looks like they turned a corner, and here comes Louisville. It looks like they turned a corner, and here comes Northern Illinois. The 13 straight wins showed us that, okay, we think they've put that behind us. Now, this is the reason that this is the third for me, is because this is the one that is still the least proven to me. Because we need to see them go out this season without the Northern Illinois motivation anymore and say, okay, can you now have that mindset when you don't have the game against Northern Illinois to push to? Because that game's not going to have, like, throwing that in their faces is not going to mean anything now. But Malachi Fitz, I'm like, I don't know, what are you talking about? What does Northern Illinois have? I didn't lose to Northern Illinois. CJ Carson be like, I played 0 snaps against Northern Illinois, coach. Like, I don't know, like that. It's a different season. Now it's like, okay, is your culture strong enough to say, we don't need that game anymore? We needed it last year, but learning from that game is why now we're in that position. And I think we see all great programs go through this. We saw Alabama go through this. Okay, yeah, they're a good team, but can you beat Florida? Yeah, you're a good team, but can you handle this? Can you bounce back from that? Man, you were so crushed by that loss to Florida that you also went out and got smacked by Utah in the Sugar Bowl. Like that's how much that Florida loss impacted you. You got embarrassed by Utah. And remember, this is back pre-players opting out of bowl games. You can't give me like, well, they didn't want to be there. Well, they were all there. Like, they absolutely wanted to be there. That's a different era. It's not today's era. And how did they bounce back? They went out that next year, won the title, won 3 the next 4 titles, right? They showed they could kind of overcome adversity. They can handle success. Georgia showed that in 2022. Right? I mean, you finally get that Alabama monkey off of your back, and you go out there, and the next year you're a dominant football team. Oh, Michigan had to figure out a way to beat Ohio State, and they finally figured out that allowed them to turn the corner. And so you see Clemson had to figure out how to beat South Carolina and Florida State. They could beat everybody else. They couldn't beat South Carolina and Florida State. And then, they'd have these really good games, and then they'd go play those teams to get blown out. They figured out a way to handle success. And that's what I think Notre Dame has to still show. But I'm confident that the culture of the program, based on what we saw last year, based on the things you talked about in your first point about how and it's not just Marcus Freeman. I hear that from a lot of people around the program, that nobody looks at last year as a success. And when I mean success is obviously they're all proud of what they achieved, but they all look at it as a disappointment because they thought they should have won it all. Not Brian Driscoll said, you're at Notre Dame, so you should be this. They felt that way. There was no, well, if we just play a little harder and coach a little better. There was none of that. It was, I don't like this feeling. And I don't ever want to look like that again on that stage. So we're going to go out there this offseason. We're going to do this, and this, but we're going to play with a chip on our shoulder. This is not a team that has the attitude of a team that was national runners-up. This is the attitude of a team, what I've seen, that feels like they have something to prove. Like, man, what else do you have to prove? Like, yeah, a lot. And I think that's where I'm confident the culture has finally shifted and that foundation was laid. And that's sort of reason number 3 for me, Shaun, which is a lot like your number 1. It's just I separated the culture and the coaching part because I was more looking at it from like development, roster enhancement, just can you get the most out of players? This is deeper. Culture to me is deeper. It all ties together, but I wanted to be separate because it's deeper for me because this is more about what's your why? Like every day when you're home this summer or when you're out there and the coach, what's your why? Why are you giving everything you got in the weight room? Why are you giving everything you got on the field? Is it just because I don't want to get beat out? Is it because my coach is making me? It's because my dad's pressuring me? Or is it because I want to be the best because I don't ever want to get to the point where I have to feel that again? Because I know I'm capable of more and I want to show more. And I think that's a big part of why I think the culture now is different from the one we've seen in the past, where they needed that loss to rebound that season. And the fact that we didn't see another game like that last year speaks to coaching is better, talent is better, culture is better. And I think those things are all important ingredients to a championship football team.
That's why every year being different is an amazing thing, right? Because it brings different tests. It's not too many people that go undefeated in college football. Like I said, every championship team has a moment, has a testing, whether it's a loss or whether it's inside the locker room, whatever it is, it's something. And if Northern Illinois was that test for that team, then so be it. I thought it was that, and the next week losing key cogs on the defensive offensive lines in the midst of a rout against Purdue.
Right.
I'm like, man, you respond on the field, but you lose 2 people on the offensive line, 2 people on the defensive line. That's the locker room. I'm thinking like, oh man, but they came right back out and just kept moving.
And that's the point. It's not the Northern Illinois loss. It's the fact that we didn't see another Northern Illinois loss. And that's how I said, it wasn't Purdue. It wasn't Miami. It wasn't Louisville for me. It was Georgia Tech. It was Navy. It was Army. It was Florida State. The fact that they went out there and didn't just win games, they smashed everybody they played until USC. And in that game where they didn't play well, they literally never trailed for a second of that game. That's the difference. And that's how you handle success. Because we always saw lose to Marshall and then show progress and then show progress, show progress. And then there's that step back moment. That's what Northern Illinois was. It was another step back moment. The fact that we didn't see that over the next 13 game winning streak is what we're talking about here to anyone actually listening, that it's handling success. All those other losses were how do you handle adversity? You bounce back and handle adversity. Pay attention. This is about how do you handle success. They're going to bounce back from that. We already knew they were going to do. We talked about the time they're going to bounce back from this because that's what they do. It's can you handle success once you've moved past the moment of adversity? Can you handle success? And that's what this team showed last season. Now they've got to show that they can continue to do that where they don't have a Northern Illinois to point to as the reason to stay humble, as the reason to stay working, as the reason to keep doing what they're doing. Yeah. And that's going to be the thing that we're going to learn. And I think that we will learn that possibly because of the attitude they've had about losing to Ohio State this offseason.
Yeah. For me, my third reason, I packaged your third reason into my first.
Keep going.
Okay. I packaged your third reason I had packaged into my first reason. But for me, I think my third reason is the quarterback situation. I believe in the hope. I'm sorry. I have hope when it comes to these quarterbacks that they could raise the level of quarterback play in Notre Dame and raise everyone else on the offense to another level of efficiency. That's just the hope and belief I have. And maybe I'm out over my skis a little bit. That's fine. But I've watched it with my own eyes for the last 2 years. I've sat there and watched the other field and seen the talent, seen the arm strength, and been wowed by what I've seen on the other side of the field as practice was going on right in front of me. So I have reason to have hope, up close and personal evidence to have hope for what this offense can do with these first-time starters at quarterback. And for me, that is why I'm confident, because I feel like the missing element when you get into those big-time games in the semifinal and in the national championship, you're going to have to be able to throw the football. You're going to have to be able to make big plays in the passing game. And when Notre Dame started to do that in the second half, you saw they were able to put points on the board. And so that, for me, is the missing piece that I think from a recruiting and development standpoint, we're going to find out very quickly whether or not Notre Dame has answered the bell. I think they have answered that. And we're going to see it on full display, in my opinion. I truly believe that. That's my third reason why I feel confident. And it's amazing because we point back to 2015. It's very similar from this point. It's a competition going into the fall. There's a quarterback competition. I think in talking to several people, Malik established himself pretty early in that fall camp and allowed them to come out hitting on all cylinders.
He did that following the Music City Bowl.
Yeah, you probably could say
I
that.
would argue that Malik established himself started in the winter. The moment Everett transferred is when, in my opinion, Malik Zaire, it was partly because of Malik Zaire and him kind of, hey, this guy's kind of gonna take charge of this type of thing. And so your culture got established that offseason by your starting quarterback because of his leadership, not the leadership of the head football coach. It was the leadership of the quarterback and the leadership of that team, the Jalen Smiths, the guys that were like, hey, we're not gonna take this line down. We're gonna go out there and win this year. And to your point, Shaun, is I do think that the current, you saw it in the intel report that I put up about the quarterbacks, and especially one in particular, that there's a recognition in the room, the locker room, that, hey, we got some cats we can win with. And that's what was true last year with Riley Leonard. I'm not saying it wasn't true Sam Hartman. But like, that's the thing is like, look, if we can just give Riley time, we know he's going to go make a play. If we could just keep this thing close, we know Riley's going to step up and make a play. It may be running around, it may be throwing the ball, but Riley's going to step up and make a play. When you have a quarterback that you believe in, it just changes your whole dynamic. And like the Miami team last year, for the most part, was kind of the same Miami team from the previous year. What was different? There's a belief that, hey, if we got Cam back here, if we just keep this thing close, like Cam's going to go make a play to help us win this football game. That was the biggest difference. And that was true with Riley as well, that, hey, keep blocking, keep working, keep running, because Like Jaden Greathouse wasn't turning around blocking on that third down because he developed that relationship with Riley. Like, I know when Riley's tucking and running, and I know when he wants to do something different. Defense is thinking Riley's running, and Jaden's like, hey, let me get open here, and then boom, he hits him. If I keep working, I know he's going to get the ball to me. And if we just get a guy on a guy, we know that Riley's going to go out there and make a play for us. I think that's absolutely a big part of where my confidence is as well. We're on the same page on this next one, Shaun. I'm right there with you. I just think talent at quarterback is a big part of this. And when you look at past teams, 2013, you didn't have Everett Golson because he had gotten suspended. 2015 to 2016, you had a quarterback battle that I think was handled incredibly poorly that really rocked that locker room. I don't see that happening with this quarterback battle. You were moving on to a new quarterback in 2021 from what you'd had for 3 years. 2019, I don't think that was as much of a quarterback thing as just it was a leadership thing at the top. I just think created an environment where you just weren't going to get the most out of that team. And that wasn't Ian Book's fault. That was an overall leadership of the program problem. So I think all those things factor into where quarterback is lower on this list for me because I don't think they need the quarterback to be what some of those other teams needed the quarterback to be necessarily. If they get it, that's going to be a lot of fun. But I think this team needs the quarterback to play well, but it doesn't need the quarterback to play like Kyler Murray in 2018 or Trevor Lawrence in 2020, where he had to literally put that team on his shoulders and carry him. I don't think they need him to be like Joe Burrow 2019. They don't need that. They need him to just play, this is who you are. Let's go out and do it. I think that's going to be the big key.
I think they did a good job. This is the recognition of knowing what your team is. You can speak to this. I do. I don't envy coaches at all, especially head coaches and their assistants. Because when you hear them say every year is a different team, they're absolutely right. And every year you have to figure out the way that you're going to win. And you're constantly trying to figure out move and like, okay, we did this our best last year. What's going to be our go-to this year? What are we going to depend? Everything's different. And so I'm interested in seeing how they handle, having a certain, we jokingly say, Malik jokingly says, Coach Denbrock probably this year is like, hey, honey, where can you get the LSU playbook out the attic? Can you get the Jaden Daniels plays out the attic? I might need those this year, because it's just certain things that as a creator, he probably wants to go and do a lot of different things. Mm-hmm. But you figure out this is who we are, this is what we do best, and we're going to make sure that we do it the best so that we can win. And I'm super excited to find out what is going to be Notre Dame's, what's going to be the best for Notre Dame this year, specifically offensively. I'm super excited to find out what that's going to be with these two young quarterbacks.
It's there's a lot of things I'm sure Mike Denbrock would have liked to have done last year that he couldn't. Just like there's going to be some things this year that I'm sure Mike Denbrock's going to. I promise you, there's going to be a 3rd and 1, 4th and 1 situation where Mike Denbrock's thinking, "Man, I wish Riley Leonard, miss Riley Leonard." It just those moments present themselves. Just like there's times last year where he was like, "Man, I miss Jaden Daniels," or "Man, I miss Everett Golson," or whatever. Because there are just some things you wanted to do. Hey, I know we can go after this team this way, but I don't know that we have the personnel at receiver. And sometimes we're talking about the quarterback, but man, I sure miss having Malik Neighbors and Ryan Thomas, because calling plays is a whole lot easier when you got them cats running around. I mean, but good coaches build around their talent. And to your point, there's certainly some things that we didn't see last year that we're going to see this year. And sometimes we'll see the same thing we saw last year, but the volume is different. The manner in which they went about is going to be different. So I think all those things are a part of it. But I think the final piece for me, Shaun, is I think why I'm confident is I think the bar has been raised defensively from where it was in the past. And I look at it and say, I think that this defense is capable of saying there's a floor now that's here because of the mindset of the head coach, but even more so because of the fact that the talent has been elevated to the degree where you can just go out talent people more than what they were able to do in the past. And now it's kind of like, how bad of a coach would Chris Ash have to be to not have a pretty good defense with this unit? And that's never been the question about Chris Ash. Is it going to be championship caliber? But it's going to be pretty good. And the fact that I now expect I have more faith that both sides of the ball are going to be top 10 caliber units, that there's not a side of the ball that you have to overcome, which was not always true in past years. Is that part going to be good enough? Like when you think about the areas that we were concerned about in 2021, we were like, I don't know how good this offensive line is going to be. I don't know how good the receiving core is going to be other than Kevin Austin. I don't know how good the secondary is going to be. There's a lot of I don't even know if they're going to be good, much less championship caliber. You look at this team and you're saying, what are your concerns? Is tight end going to be good enough to win a championship? Is which stud next to Adon Schuler is going to step up at safety? Like, is the D line that you had that basically beat Penn State and Georgia, you lose from that R.J. Oben and Howard Cross, but you get back Jason Onye and Bubakar Traore and eventually Jordan Patelho and Bryce Young. I mean, that unit, is it going to be good enough? I think that's all part of it. We're just the bar has been raised on the defensive side of the ball. And then you combine that with what I believe to be kind of from the previous points about the offense, quarterback, Denbrock, talent, all that. I feel like this team all around doesn't have you have to carry this side anymore. Like 2015 was like, they got a shot to be pretty good if the offense can carry the defense, because I don't know if that guy that we saw coaching that defense last year is going to be good enough to get the most out of this talent. Like the bar has been raised so much higher now than that. And then the opposite was kind of true in like some of those other years. Like, is the offense going to be good enough in the big games for this team to win? And I think they showed that a little bit more last year. So I just think those are all things that factor in, Shaun, for me, of why I'm a little bit more optimistic this year that this team is going to be different. Coaching, depth of talent, culture, trust at quarterback, and just looking all around and saying that the bar has been raised really on both sides of the ball to where the floor now is what the ceiling used to be on both sides of the ball. I mean, last year we were all kind of looking at 36 points a game. I hope they can I hope they can do better than that this year. 36 points a game is more points than Notre Dame scored any single season of the Brian Kelly era. Most they ever scores 34.5. Again, I think the bar's been raised, and that's my final reason for optimism. You got anything else you want to add to that, Shaun? You got any other points, or are we kind of handle them all?
Yeah, that was my three. I think we're spot on, lock, step, lock and step, and different orders, different nuance to it, but it's all the same. It's all the same.
That's going to finish part 2 of our show today. Our team, the T of our TCF, our team topic. Reminder, folks, before we move into part 3, if we get asked a lot, hey, how can I support Irish Breakdown? Best way to do that, down there, you see it on the crawler, boards.irishbreakdown.com, boards.irishbreakdown.com. Sign up for an annual membership, monthly membership. Join a booster club. If you join a booster club, you get some free gear. You get some IB merch in return for that. But that's always the best way to support us. If you're not a message board person, that's fine. You can lurk however often you like, but it's still the absolute best way to support what we're doing at Irish Breakdown, help us to continue to grow and do even more. with the content here, but also the content that we're doing on the message board. So definitely want to check that out at boards.irishbreakdown.com.